We started this series, and we did it purposely, not wanting to do debates. There have been a great many of those, but giving you an opportunity to judge the four major candidates on their own. As it relates to our guests today, I've known him for a long time. When I chaired the Citizens Committee on the ballpark, he was right there with us. When I chaired the Strong Mayor movement, he was there virtually at every meeting. And I value that so much. He's just an extraordinary public servant, an extraordinary person, blessed with great values and a wonderful family. And District 2 of our city has been so lucky to have him represent their district. And depending upon what happens on the 19th, it may be that he will be representing the city of San Diego. Welcome, please, the Honorable Kevin Faulconer.
Well, good morning. Thank you, George. And yes, he is that impressive. Just ask me, and I'll tell you, because I've heard all the great George Mitrovich stories for years, as have you. And sitting here today, and George just mentioned the work that we did on the Strong Mayor change for the city of San Diego, and it was many Saturday mornings that we were at the Cal Western School of Law. Some of you, I think, were probably there as well, as we said, how do we change for the better our city government and to make it function better? So I'm a big fan and believer of the City Club and this organization, and I want to thank all of you who took some time this morning on your Saturday morning to come listen to me for a little bit. Yeah, I'm running for mayor, and I'm hoping to win. I've been on the council for a number of years now, actually about 7 years, and fortunate enough to represent this area, the beach communities on District 2. And when I think back to when I was first elected, as I think many of you know, our city was in really difficult straits financially. And we had no city credit rating. We were under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. We weren't in the capital markets. We had no, it was just a mess. And we were teetering on the verge of bankruptcy. And I've spent most of my career since then on the city council trying to turn this ship around, to get to the place where we can start talking about how we reinvest dollars now back into our neighborhoods. But one of the main messages is that we can't afford to go backward and repeat those mistakes of the past that got our city in so much trouble financially. And when I think about many of the accomplishments that we did as a city that I'm very proud of, including pension reform, to get us out of the unsustainable business that we are in the city. When I talk about the fact that voters passed managed competition, the ability for the private sector to come in and compete for city services so we can still deliver that value to the neighborhoods. Those are the type of the things that I strongly believe our city must continue if we're truly going to turn the corner and financially and get back into doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. And it wasn't easy over the last several years, but we need a mayor that's committed to that. We need a mayor that understands where this city was, and more importantly, to know where we need to go in the future. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about the most on the campaign trail over the last, I guess it's a month and a half, 2 months now. A short election cycle. And as George mentioned, we're getting towards the end of it here, at least in the first phase, November 19th. And I'm glad to see so many young folks here today. I was young too once, George. I was a political science major at San Diego State University. So I know we have a lot of student government folks in here and poli-sci. It can work. You can get a job with a poli-sci degree, and you can enjoy it. And I've really have enjoyed my time on the council. But before I was on the council, just a little bit of background. George mentioned I live here in Point Loma with my wife Catherine and our young son Jack and Lauren. Before I was on the council, I was a volunteer. I was a volunteer on the city's Park and Recreation Board and a volunteer on the Mission Bay Park Committee. And I loved it. And it was really that volunteer experience that convinced me that running for office was something that I wanted to do. I ran for office once and didn't win. And so if there's a message I would have to all of you that are looking, seeing if you want to get in politics, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But I think if you persevere and you believe in what you're doing and you believe in what you're talking about, I think you can have a very rewarding career in public service. And when I was running for office, one of the things that really spurred me to run and then made it a part of my campaign, which I eventually did win on the city council, was the work that I was doing on the Mission Bay Park Committee, where as a volunteer for a number of years, I noticed that the city was not doing what it was supposed to be doing in Mission Bay Park. The revenues from the hotels, the lease revenues from the hotels on Mission Bay Park, were supposed to be staying in Mission Bay Park for environmental improvements, public improvements, but that wasn't happening. The city was taking it and keep putting it into the general fund and not giving Mission Bay its fair share. So I vowed to change that. That's one of the reasons that I ran and when I won for office, and we eventually put a ballot measure on the election that voters supported, and they supported overwhelmingly, and they made that change. And so now we have a dedicated funding stream, not only for Mission Bay Park, but also for other San Diego regional parks. And that was one of my first and biggest accomplishments that when I was on the council. And it really showed, I think, that when you work together with people, you can get things done. And on that case, I worked very closely with my friend and colleague, our former council member, Donna Fry. And something that I strongly believe in, and in fact, it's what the basis of the City Club and the City Club Forum has been since its inception. One of the reasons why George and I get along so well. It's not about being a Republican or a Democrat or decline to state. It's about doing what's best for San Diego. And how do we get good ideas together with good people that want to have those discussions and engage in those discussions to figure out what we should be doing as a city. And when we sat around those many Saturdays, as George knows, we sat around saying things weren't really working very well with our city manager form of government. There wasn't the accountability that we needed to figure out what was happening and who was in charge, for lack of a better description. And we had great civic discussions, numerous debates, ultimately debates in front of the city council. Ultimately, the public had the right to weigh in on that. We put that on the ballot measure, and voters supported a trial form of this government and then ultimately supported it overwhelmingly. And so how did we do that? We did it by a civic conversation and by getting people together. And so that's one of the biggest reasons, I think, why when you look at local government and when you look at the successes, when I think back to what we've done on the city council, our best moments are when we do work together. And we don't always get along, of course, on every single issue, but I think usually we get along, my colleagues, on trying to move the ball forward, and for the most part that has happened, and I'm very proud of the efforts that we've done since I've been elected. I'm not going to spend my whole time with a big lecture. I'm going to spend most of my time answering your questions today. But some of the key things that I see that we really need to do right now as a city. First and foremost, we need to really get back into the neighborhood services business by taking those savings that we're going to have now and in the future and putting them back into the things that matter most. And what are those things? Those are repairing our streets, our sidewalks, our sewer and water systems, making sure we have the number of police officers that we need to have on the street. So no matter what neighborhood you live in, you deserve to know that we have the best and brightest men and women that are out there working to protect us in our police department, our fire rescue department, our lifeguard services, and the city's behind right now on that. And I've been out very aggressively talking about the need to get us back on track, particularly we need 130 new police officers to get us back to the level that we need to do as a city. I'm committed to doing that as mayor, and it will take political will to accomplish that in the face of what you often see in government is a lot of competing priorities. But I know we can do that if we continue to hold the course, as I mentioned before, on making the reforms and the changes that we made at city government here in the city of San Diego and not repeating those mistakes of the past. So I'm going to continue to press very, very strongly on that. I'm going to continue to do it in an open and transparent manner. One of the big ideas that we've been talking about on the council is putting more city information online, easily accessible format, so people of any background can see here's what's going on at the city. If you're going through a permit process, putting an addition on your house, here's where you are in the process, making city government much more open and transparent. I'm going to do that 100% better than we have been now. And as I talked before, the ability to make sure that we're continuing to cut the bureaucracy at City Hall, working better and smarter to do that. We're a big organization at the City of San Diego. We have about 10,000 employees. And as somebody now who's been there for a number of years, I know we have a lot of great people. We have a lot of great strengths. But I also know this organization has a lot of weaknesses that we need to help and make sure we're operating much, much better. Because as somebody who's been there now fighting for us for a number of years, I know what we know, which is that the dollars that we're dealing with are our dollars. They're our tax dollars. We have to treat it like that and make sure we're using them the most efficiently as possible so we have those dollars to reinvest back into our neighborhoods. One of the reasons why I'm so strong on managed competition, one of the reasons why I'm very, very strong on growing our local small businesses here to get that tax revenue generated, to provide good paying jobs for our families, good paying jobs for our kids as they're going to graduate and go to get a great degree and have the opportunity for a good high paying job so you can stay in San Diego. That's going to be what I'm going to be about as mayor when I get elected, and I can't wait to get started. It has been a short but long campaign, and I'm looking forward to answering any of your questions about any particular topics of specific that are interest to you. And so fire away. George.
No, I just wanted to, if you'll repeat the questions, because this is actually being televised. Before we do that, I just want to quickly say Mark Dillon, the Chairman of Human Relations, is here. Danelle Scarborough, who's Executive Secretary of Human Relations, is here. Is Rick Gentry not here? One thing about Strong Mayor, I was often asked, and you were, who appointed you? Remember?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And the answer was, we appointed ourselves, because you can do that in a democracy, and it works. And I hope you'll keep that lesson in mind. Who would like to ask the first question of the councilman?
Yes, in fact. We had a couple bad wildfires a few years ago. I'm just wondering if we have better resources in terms of early detection and combating those earlier and better if we get another one, which I think we probably will at some point.
Yeah, the question was about wildfires and better detection and how are we positioned as a city. And the answer is a much better position, and particularly from a communication standpoint. And I give a lot of credit to our fire chief, Javier Maynard, and the work that he's done at the fire rescue department to ensure that, and they've come remarkably far. So it's all of the other departments throughout the county are much better in tune now on not only detection issues, but particularly communications issues. So some of those early communications breakdowns that they had won't be repeated. And I'll tell you, when, particularly as we're here now, and it's November, I guess. We just turned into November. Halloween was last week. We know as San Diegans that when it's October and November, when those east winds come, we know what that's meant for this region over the last decade. So we're very fortunate to have some of the best and brightest in our fire rescue department and some of the smartest, particularly as we've made some of those changes. So I believe our city and our region is much, much better prepared than it was several years ago because of those fires. Yeah, right here.
So I was wondering about the Lincoln Club mailers and if you agree with the views presented in those pamphlets being sent to the voters and specifically Democratic voters.
The question was about Lincoln Club mailers and those those pamphlets and mailers that have been out there. Groups and organizations that are independent from my campaign certainly can put out what they want. Some of them focused on candidates' issues, some of them focused on candidates' records. And I'll tell you, I'm focused on my record and the record that I've done, putting out their positive message of what's important. And I'm going to continue to do that. Sometimes you're going to have groups and organizations that support you, and sometimes you have groups and organizations that don't. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of both of that mail.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Morton.
We heard last Saturday from your opponent,
Yeah.
Mr. Fletcher, who said that he will raise taxes. Do you think it's necessary to impose more taxes on the people of San Diego?
The question was, do I think it's necessary to impose more taxes on the people of San Diego? No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Because I've known firsthand as we've seen and what we've gone through in the city, that we have a lot of changes internally to do before we even talk about raising taxes. So that's why I've been such a strong opponent of that. In fact, a couple of years ago, as you know, there was a measure on the ballot that sought to increase the sales tax, which I opposed. Voters overwhelmingly opposed by about 2/3. And that was before we'd even done the pension changes that we needed to do and the ballot changes. And so before you would, talk about should you be sending more money to City Hall, no, we need to do a better job at the city of the dollars that we already have and that we're already providing and getting from our residences. And that, I think, is a fundamental difference between myself and several of the other opponents out there. Strong supporter of pension reform, and you have to have a mayor that's going to hold true to pension reform, hold true to the 5-year pensionable pay freeze that I helped to negotiate with my colleagues on the city council, and we negotiated unanimously. So I believe the best way that we can grow tax revenue into the city of San Diego is to grow our economy. And so particularly when we're talking about increasing more businesses, particularly when we're saying increasing the visitors to San Diego, our tourism industry, growing our TOT, transient occupancy tax. The fact that Bob Filner stopped our marketing program this year was the absolute wrong thing to do for this city. As we've seen what other cities did in this competitive environment, they had much more greater increases in their revenue. We need to support our local jobs, our local businesses. That's how we're going to grow dollars and more revenue into the city. It's not about saying, I want you to send more money to City Hall. And I'll give you one other example, one recent example. Just last week, there was a proposal to the City Council to raise the linkage fee, the so-called linkage fee, which I say there is no linkage, it's not a fee, it's a jobs tax. That passed 5-4 this week. Basically, it was sought to, and it will if it goes past, increase by 500% fees on commercial development in the city of San Diego. So think about that. If we're trying to attract jobs, if we're trying to have businesses want to expand, particularly when we talk about manufacturing jobs. So if we want to increase that, the last thing that we should be doing as a city is saying, we're going to make it more difficult and more expensive for you to locate and create those jobs here. Because people have a choice. They can go to Chula Vista, they can go to Poway, you can go to other parts of the region or the state. We need to do everything we can to be encouraging good job growth and development. So I was a vocal opponent of that and will continue to be, because I think that was simply the wrong policy for the city of San Diego. Great question. Yes?
Mark, oh, sorry. Yes.
Question on homelessness. As somebody who was fortunate enough to represent downtown San Diego for a number of years while I was on the council before we redrew the lines, probably spent more time on homeless issues than I ever would have thought. And it is a difficult problem on many levels. But let me first say that I believe the city has an obligation, and the mayor has an obligation to help to make sure we're providing as much help and assistance as we can. And it is tough because many of our homeless population are what we call duly diagnosed, meaning they have mental health and substance abuse problems, either drugs or alcohol. And so while it's tough to do that, we still have an obligation to do everything we can. And as I've said, it was more than just providing an emergency bed, because emergency beds are important. But at the same time, we should be spending most of our efforts to help actually transition people out of being homeless. And so one of the things that we did, and it caused a lot of political back and forth, and I had to go out there. I see Carol Eisman here from our downtown community. I was battled back and forth by downtown neighbors and some local businesses. But we opened up a brand new facility in downtown San Diego called the Connections Housing Center, site of the former World Trade Center building. $38 million facility that says, yes, there are beds, but there's transitional housing beds. There's healthcare services. There's counseling services. There's all kinds of other folks that are there helping with the whole idea, permanent supportive housing, to transition people out of homelessness for those individuals that need help. And I said, we'll start one in downtown San Diego. We'll prove that it could be successful. And the key for us as a city, and really I think the key for the next mayor, is to have the political will to say, okay, and now we need to replicate it in other parts of the city. Because while homelessness is an acute problem in downtown, it's not the only area of the city that we need help and need to be able to provide some of that assistance to people. So that is just an ongoing issue, but I think it's an important one for the city, and I'm going to continue to help and do anything I can, everything I can as mayor. Great
Mark
question.
Dillon?
Yeah, good, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Back to economic issues, what would you do as mayor to take advantage of the economic and trade opportunity between San Diego and the Tijuana Metroplex that we haven't done in the past? And a related issue, how would you represent San Diego in the immigration reform debate that's going on? I know that's a national issue, we don't have anything, but I think it's important that those two come together.
No, great questions. Let me take the first, the latter part first. I took a leadership role on the council, and we passed a resolution unanimously on the council supporting comprehensive immigration reform, including a pathway to citizenship. I believe that's important for our city, and it's important for our city to go on record saying to our representatives in Washington, D.C., you need to get this done. You need to get this done. It's the best thing for the country, and we understand that, particularly here in San Diego. It's one of the largest border crossing cities in the country, how important that is. Now to the first part of your question on the economy, I couldn't agree more with the premise than what you just said. We have such an opportunity that we just only started to scratch the surface in terms of our ability to interact with trade and with goods on both sides of the border. I was down about 2 months ago, down at the new Tijuana Convention Center, just north of Rosarito. I was down there for an aerospace suppliers conference. And just the energy in that room on wanting to work more in terms of our side of the border and the opportunities for that to happen, the sky is the limit. And when we look at, as you said, it's not just San Diego and Tijuana, it's the whole, folks in the Economic Development Corporation will say it's the mega region. It's everything from southern Orange County all the way through northern Baja, that we have a real opportunity to be competitive, to create great jobs on both sides of the border. I'm going to encourage and foster that. One of the things that we need to do on our side, the United States side, is we're behind on the border infrastructure improvements that will speed up border crossing. One of the biggest hindrances that we have right now is the length of time it has to come through in the border crossing. And when you're having hours, wait times, sometimes 3 and 4 hours, that's a huge disincentive to creating that trade and those jobs back and forth. So I'm going to lobby very, very hard and to support our local efforts to get the funding for that on the federal level to get that going. Great question. Yeah.
I think many of us have grown weary of hearing about the ways that all candidates, both at the micro and macro level, diverge in opinion. How do you propose to reach across the aisle and bring about some compromise and solution?
Yeah, the question is everybody has different views and opinions, and how do you reach across the aisle to do that? I like to think I've been doing that for a number of years now on the council, and that's why I've been able to be very successful. And so when I look at the work that I've done with our current council president and interim mayor, Todd Gloria, he and I work very, very well together. When I look at the work I did with our former council president, Tony Young, some of our greatest accomplishments in moving forward on a lot of these things, it happens because we have that personal relationship. And as I said before, it can't be about partisanship, because when it is, that usually leads to gridlock and no solutions. It has to be about working together. And when we see as San Diegans what's happening on the federal level with that government shutdown, it was awful. That's no solution. That's no solution at all. Fortunately, we have a better track record of working together here in San Diego. And when I'm mayor, knock on wood, I have to be able to do that. I have to work effectively with my colleagues that I've worked for a number of years now. And so, as an example, Todd will still be our council president. All of my colleagues that I work with now, Sherry, Marty, all Lori, Scott, all on down the way, we're going to continue that relationship. And they know that they can trust me, that I say what I mean, and I do what I say. And I think that's what our city needs right now, more than anything. I got a couple more
We
minutes.
have 2, John Freeman,
Yeah.
and then we'll finish with Elby.
Yeah. No.
Kind of a tricky question. One, if you weren't running,
Yeah.
given that they're related, who would you vote for? And the second question is, what do you admire most about each of the 3 candidates?
Oh, it's great question. I gave a lot of thought to if I was going to run or if I didn't run. So I'm going to vote for myself on election day. But you know, every race is different, and so if you had, it's hard to say who the candidates would have been or not been. But I will say I will say that you get to know people when you're on the campaign trail quite a bit. And so, you know, when I think about David Alvarez, I will tell you, David and I disagree on a fair amount of policy issues. But I admire the way that he has his convictions and says what he means. I like to think that that's exactly the way that I approach it. We spend a lot of hours of the day sitting next to each other, and we have a pretty good a very good relationship. And I've been very supportive. You know, when you look at Nathan, he's, you know, very strong on, you know, the things that he believed in, services to his country, the work he's done, and he's out pushing very hard, putting his agenda through. And then Mike Aguirre, what do you say about Mike Aguirre? You know, what do you say about Mike Aguirre? Mike is a great human being, and I like him a lot personally. And he and I don't always agree on everything anyway, but we've always got along very personally. And I served with Mike when he was city attorney for a number of years. And so he has some very good ideas on a lot of issues, and I'll leave it at that for Mike. How's that?
Ms. Olson gets the last question.
My understanding is, I've also got kind of two questions. My understanding is that you support the shipbuilders in their effort to overturn
Yes.
the neighborhood plan. And I have been reading about it. I asked Mr. Alvarez, from his perspective, what was going on. And it seemed to me it was a very good compromise. And I do not understand why the shipbuilders are keeping on their side of it. And also, it does appear they're not entirely truthful in their petitions. One question. The second one is, I saw this morning just kind of that the return on the pension fund is only 7.25 this year, and they need 7.50. So that immediately puts us in the hole on that issue. And you don't want to raise taxes. I read that you did not want us to pay for trash, you know, which most communities, we do pay something for our trash pickup and all that. So those two questions. Sorry.
That's a long question, but that's okay. Let me take the pension board vote too. They're completely autonomous. The pension board is. They make their decisions on what they believe is the right thing to do. The city got in trouble years ago when you had the city council trying to influence decisions. So when the pension board makes their decisions on rate of return or not, that is completely up to them, and then the city has to deal with that, and we will. And likely,
money if there's not enough in the pot?
absolutely true, absolutely true. And then back to your other question on the issue of the ship repair industry, I am a very strong supporter of those jobs and what they mean for San Diego. And I did not support the Barrio Logan Community Plan when it came before the council for the primary reason that it changed the ability of the suppliers that provide and feed jobs and parts to the ship repair industry from being able to locate by right where they are right now, right across from those ship repair facilities down at the harbor. And there was a lot of good things that were in the plan, and I said so at the council. But the fact that we would change that and that we would put those jobs at risk and that industry at risk was the wrong decision, part of that plan. And that industry is too important to change that, and to say you have to go through a conditional use permit process and all of the appeals that could go along with that, rather than saying you have the ability to locate there by right, and you should be able to continue to locate there by right. And so I will continue to speak up for that. I believe in it strongly. That needs to be changed. Those jobs are great working class jobs, good quality jobs that we have to fight to make sure that they're here not only now, but for decades to come. It's too important to the city's economy, it's too important to the regional economy, and it's too important to the United States Navy that uses those facilities on a daily basis as well. Good question. Yeah.
I want to thank you.
Thank you, George.
Anyone who knows Kevin and knows his relationship with his Democratic colleagues, particularly with Todd Gloria, have been so strong to your question. It reminds me we've come a very long way. In 1964, had President Kennedy lived, he and Mr. Goldwater had discussed, you have to think about this, had discussed using the same campaign plane. They had great ideological differences. They had a great friendship. And you can do this. You can hold to your views and your convictions, and you should, without demonizing the other party. This man has never done that. We're grateful to all of you, La Jolla Country Day, to Jonathan, to Point Loma Nazarene, to Jill Monroe, for coming. It's a beautiful day. The councilman has other places to go. Isn't that a surprise? So let's thank you.
Thank you.